Hello and welcome to this lesson. Now we're going to get practical, and I'm going to give you an assignment that you'll have to complete in this lesson. So you're going to download this project called Stock Analysis. And in here, you're going to find some packages such as the aggregators package. You can ignore that for now. You can have a client package as well as a file processors package. And the objective of this assignment is going to be for you to complete the body of two methods. Okay, and those methods are in this class, the stock file application. Let's open that up. This class contains the main method, and we're invoking inside of this main method. We're invoking this method called populate stock file data. So you're going to have to complete the body of this method, which is defined down here. And right now, it's just sort of stubbed out. And there's another method that you'll be completing, and that resides in this other Java file called stockfilereader.java. Right? There's another class, and that method is down here, read file data. Okay, so you're completing these two methods. You're completing the populate stock file data method that belongs in this stock file application, and this stock file reader class has this read file data. And the objective of this assignment, why am I giving it to you, is for you to get practice working with collections. We looked at the hash map, we looked at sets, as well as lists and linked lists and so on. So you're going to get practice utilizing those data structures and getting practice with the collections framework. And I named this course appropriately so, Mastering Practical Java Development. And so this is, think of this as an actual project that you'll work on in the workplace. And if you've been coding for some time in the, the practical world, you'll quickly come to realize that you'll have to read other people's code, all right? And so I purposely coded up some of this stuff in these classes for you to go through and understand what's going on. And in the real world, you'll come across code that is just horrendous to look at, completely confusing. And you'll also come across code that looks like a piece of artwork. And that just depends on the level of the programmer that wrote the program. So here's some Java code that is not, it's not the best code, but it's also not terrible. You can, with the amount of knowledge that you've gained so far in this course, as well as the previous course, Getting Started with Java, you should be able to understand what's going on in this code. And the best way to start is from the main method. Let's go back to the stock file application. It's this main method. You read here and try to figure out what's going on, and and see the usage of populate stock file data and what we're doing after that. But essentially, this program reads stock data. So if we go to Google and we type in AAPL, the Apple ticker, every day has an opening and closing price, and you can go back to a year, 5 years, but the data that I've provided you as part of this project is right here. Okay, this is the file that will come as part of this project, and it has the opening price, the high and the low for the day, as well as a close and the volume for that day, and so on. Not important to go over the details of these columns, but essentially what you're doing is you're taking this data and you need to populate this collection that belongs in this class called stock file data. So let's visit that class, and this is that class. The actual data that we're populating is right here. This is the structure that we're going to be populating that spreadsheet with. That will be your objective. So notice that this is a list of maps. Okay, so inside of the list angle brackets, right, we've defined the kind of data that can go in here, and that's a bunch of maps. And each one of these maps is going to have a key of type string and the value of double. And if you look at the spreadsheet, you'll notice that that's exactly what all of this data is. Even though the header contains the key, and these are the different values for each one of these columns, these keys, you're basically going to be populating that data structure with this set of data. So think through on how you can do that. To achieve this, you're going to need to first read the file data and populate a list of lines, right? Every single line could be saved into this list of lines, and that's what this read file data method returns. And so in this stock file application class, to this method populate stock file data, we can pass in the headers as well as the different lines. So the headers, there's basically just, the method is already there here in the stock file reader. That's this method right here. This returns the headers appropriately so you don't have to do anything here. What you do have to complete is this read file data, and you can use the try with resources that we looked at in the previous course. You should already be familiar with reading and writing files. So you're reading the file and you're passing in the headers as well as all of the lines of the file, and this method is going to populate this data structure right here, all right? And that's exactly what this is going to return. It's going to be saved into this variable called data result, and then we can call the add data method on this stock file data to populate this data structure, which is a list of hash maps. So take your time with this. It may take you a long time, or it may take you a very short time, depending on what level you're at. But this is crucial for you to get practice. Don't just move on to my solution. Now, one thing you'll notice is the list inside of the angle brackets, the data type that goes in here is going to be a hash map of string keys and double values. Over here, when we're creating the instance using the new keyword, we don't have to type out all of this again, right? In previous lessons, like I showed you, if we needed to create an array list, we would have to define what goes in the angle brackets, and let's just call this values. In the previous lessons, I was showing you that you needed to put in a string inside of the angle brackets like this. But Java is smart enough to understand what you mean. If you declared it in the first set of angle brackets here, you don't have to state that here again, okay? And it's erroring out here because I didn't do the import. So let's do that. And now it's compiling. Using the new keyword, we do not have to state that data type again. And that just reduces the amount of code that you need to type, right? This is a lot simpler than if I had to copy this whole thing again and paste it here, right? It's a much longer line. Even though this is legal Java code, it's still kind of painful to look at. So the Java community made it easier for programmers, and we can just use an empty angle syntax for the second part of the linked list or any collection declaration. But the first part here, this is of course necessary. We need to state exactly what kind of data would go into this structure. So ultimately what's going on here is inside of this stock file application.java, we are going to run this main method. You right click and hit run as Java application, and it should show you a list of maps. Right now it's empty because both of these methods, the populate stock file data as well as the read file data, is empty. But when you're done completing the body of those two methods, the output for this application should look something like this. So when you see this kind of structure being printed out when you run your program, you know you've got it right. So go ahead and try this assignment out, and I will see you when we return. All right, welcome back. Hopefully you took a shot at completing this assignment. It may have been challenging for some of you, but that's totally okay as long as you're practicing. Even if it doesn't work and you're getting the practice, that's all that matters. That's what's going to make you better. So let's get started. The main method, this is what, that's the starting point of our application. When I right click here on this class called stock file application, it's going to populate this data structure right here. Okay. And the variable is called data result, and we pass in this data result to the file data. So you don't have to change any of this. This is sort of already, all of this is wired in for you. The assignment was for you to complete two method bodies. One of them was populate stock file data, and the other one was inside of the stock file reader class down here, read file data. So these two methods you should have completed. So let's get started. Let's start with this method first, read file data. So this is going to return a list of strings. And what are these going to be? These are going to be lines, the lines of the file. So far, it's sort of stubbed out. I left in the bare minimums. So let's start completing this method. I've defined a variable called lines, and it's of type string, and that's what's going to get returned. So let's populate those lines. I'm going to use the try with resources functionality that I spoke about in the previous course. And that this is very useful for reading and writing files because you don't have to close the buffered reader. So let's define a buffered reader. We'll call it BR equals new buffered reader. And to the constructor of this buffered reader, we're going to pass in a new file reader and pass in the file path. So that should be in this class right here. Okay, that's this guy right here. When an instance of this stock file reader class is instantiated, it gets populated with the file path that has been provided. And if you go to the stock file application, notice that we are passing in this file called table.csv, and this you should already have as part of the project. Okay, so let's complete that by putting in the variable file path. This is a member of this class, this variable, so we can access it in all of these methods. Oh, and we don't need a semicolon there. We need a open bracket, and inside of this open close bracket, we're going to do all of the magic of reading the data from the file and inserting it into this lines array list. So when you read a file, of course, it starts from the first line. So what I'm going to do is skip the first line, okay? And the way we could just do that is br.readLine. Okay, so it's going to read the first line, and we're not saving it anywhere. We're not, storing it. We're just, going to read the first line so that it advances the cursor. And now we're going to define a variable. We'll call it line, and let's give it an initial value of null. We need to instantiate it with null. And now we advance from the second line onwards. Okay. So this is just going to be a while loop while the line is equal to br.readLine, right? While all of this is not equal to null, meaning that there is more lines to be read, then we're just going to add to lines the actual line that we have read, like that. And that's it. This is the method. Remember, with try with resources, you don't have to close the buffered reader. We don't need that finally block that I showed you in the previous course. That was a pretty painful process. With Java 7, they made it a lot easier with this try with resources functionality for reading and writing to resources on the file system. So there you go. This is it doesn't matter if you didn't use try with resources, as long as whatever approach you used here, as long as that was able to write all of the lines to this array list variable called lines. As long as you were able to populate this structure, when this method is invoked, it returns that list of lines, then you did you did fine. All right, so that's one method. Let's move on to the other one, which may have been a little bit more complicated. That's the populate stock file data. So this is the variable data result. It's of type list with hash map, right? So this variable is already defined, and we're just returning it. Figure out how to populate this data structure so that the data that gets printed in the console looks like this. So it's getting the headers already because I'm invoking the fr.getHeaders. The stock file reader has the method called getHeaders. So we're passing in that, and then we're passing in all of the lines in the file by invoking readFileData as an argument to populate stock file data. So it's getting the inputs that it needs. Now we just need to populate this data result. And this is where you're going to get a lot of practice working with collections. That was the whole intention of this assignment. So let's first loop over the list of lines, and that's going to be the collection lines, right, which is being passed as an argument to this method. So for each one of these lines, what we're going to do is we're going to split the line by a comma, like that. And what this does natively in Java is just going to return an array of strings. So we'll define a variable called values, like that. Okay, so this variable, it's an array, and each slot has the value in each column. So inside of this file, the first slot is going to have this value, the second slot is going to have this value, the third slot is going to have this value, and so on. And we're doing that for every single line So once we get this values array, we need to iterate over this values array. So let's just define a variable called value, and this is going to be the thing that we're going to traverse over the values data set. Okay, so this variable is going to take place of every single slot inside of values for the particular line. Okay, so right now we're still on that, on a particular line. We're splitting the line by this comma. We get this set of values, and for each one of these values, this value variable is going to take the place, and we need to convert this string into a double. So the way we could do that is we just need to use the double dot parse double method. Okay, and a lot of these wrapper classes, such as the double, the integer wrapper class, the float wrapper class, they have these parsing methods where you can just invoke the parse double or the parse integer and pass in the string, and it's going to convert that into the actual data type for the kind of data that it is, right? So we're converting it into a double because we know it's a double. And now what we need to do is populate a map with the key being each one of the headers. So the key is going to be, for example, open, high, low, close, right? Each one of these are keys, and they're going to have their respective values for the particular record in this file. So for that hash map, I'm going to define that hash map up here outside of this values loop. So it's hash map, and the first argument is going to be a string. That's the column header, and the value is, of course, double. And we'll call it header value map. And you can of course name these anything you want, whatever makes sense. And of course we don't need to redefine the arguments in the angle brackets like I spoke about earlier, right? As long as you state it in the first set of brackets, Java is smart enough to know what kind of data is going to go into header value map. You don't have to repeat it here. So inside of header value map, let's insert the data. We're going to do header value map dot put, and then the first key is going to be, of course, the header, right? So we could do headers dot get, and then we need to give the index position. So what is headers? Headers is this guy right here. This is being provided as part of this method. So we're going to need to specify the key for each one of the header titles. And for that, I'm just going to use a counter variable. Let's just define that up here above the hash map. I'm just going to call it int cnt, and let's just give it a starting value of 0. And the cnt is going to be the counter variable that we're going to use to get the data at the particular index position of the different header values. So this is going to be the key. The value is going to be dval. Okay, and after that, don't forget to increment the count variable so that we can move on to the next header in this set of headers that gets passed. All right, so that's pretty much it. This is the data result list. So we're going to add to this list this header value map. So as part of this outer loop that's going over each and every line, we're going to add the parsed line, the line that has been converted into a hash map. We're going to add that data to this data result. So we could just do data result.add and then pass in the header value map. And there you go. This is it. We've completed this method. Hopefully this provided you enough practice working with lists and array lists and collections. And it also gave you an opportunity to read already written code and figure out what's going on. That's half the battle. The more code you read, the better programmer you become. So don't skimp out on reading other people's code. That's an excellent exercise for you yourself to become a better programmer. This variable up here, I just sort of left it part of the code. We can just remove it. Okay, we don't need that. And now let's hit play. And boom, notice that we are getting the expected data. Now it prints it all in one line, but the screenshot that I showed you earlier had each one of these hash maps on separate lines, and that was just to present to you a more reader-friendly example, but this is working as expected, right? Each one of these hash maps is separated by a comma. And there should be a total of, well, let's look at the table. If you go all the way down, there should be a total of 251 records in this file, because the first record was the header, right? So we should see 251 values in our list when we print it out. So let's go to the top. See, this is the first record. This doesn't count towards any values. The actual values start from number 2. So we should have a total number of 251 values in our list of hash maps. So let's do a quick counter on that list. Let me just print out the size of this data result. We could do a sysout and hit play, and notice that it is in fact 251. So we know we did something right. Okay, so hopefully you made it this far. If not, don't worry. Put in the time and effort to study this code, work on it on your own. I think it's about time we wrap up this lesson. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.